What's up, Wrongdoers? This is Big Body Bang, producer of the Do the Wrong Thing podcast, and you're about to listen to the latest episode in our Artist Creative Session series. We're so excited about this series because it lets us connect with artists like you. So if you're an artist that has a project that you want to share, or if you just like to chop it up about your creative process and what inspires you, we're here for that. Reach out to us at DTWT Pod on social media, anywhere you can find us, and we'd be happy to schedule an interview with you. Now, let's get back to the show.
Yo, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up, wake up. Up you wake, up you wake, up you wake. I'm your host, L.A. And once again, we are having another Do the Wrong Thing Presents Creative Artist Sessions, where anyone in the community can reach out to us, see about having more intimate personal conversations about the things that they are currently doing in the community. With me today, I have a very special guest, Jay Guevara. Said it right?
Yes, sir.
Nailed it. All right. Was worried. Already getting commentary. So, Jay, Mr. Guevara, you go by a different name, right? What name do you go by?
So I either go by Jay or like my actual first name, Justin, pretty much. So, yeah. All so, right. Like for this interview, you could either say Jay or Justin. Like, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Just want to make sure that the people understand when, especially because we're gonna of course give everybody an opportunity to find you on socials and all that good stuff and all the things that you have put coming out. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows how you represent it. Because I know when we had Richard Blackshaw on, which you are a friend of, which I'm sure we'll talk about that connection later in the show. He goes by R&B, and I didn't realize that towards like the end of our conversation. I was like, I could have been calling him R&B this whole time. That's such a smooth ass nickname. So I want to make sure I don't miss anybody's nickname ever again. So tell me, I know you are originally from Richmond, Virginia.
Yes, sir. The home of D'Angelo, Guar, Butcher Brown, which was the former ESPN Monday Night Football theme song that did a rendition of Lil Richard's Rip It Up back in 2020. Nicholas F., numerous Mac URL battle rappers, like the list could go on and on.
Yeah. You currently are now based in the IE.
Yes, sir.
And how this whole thing came together was because of our mutual connection with R&B Richard Blackshaw. So I want to talk a little bit about that connection. How did you guys originally meet?
So I first met Richard back in December of 2021 in person at the Little Gallery in downtown San Bernardino. Cam Gnarly was having this exhibit, and I decided to pop up and really show love to a solid project from the IE. And how I connected with Richard was through Twitter, like how all of my other IE connections came along. And how I originally learned about the IE area was actually through an old podcast Cam Archer did alongside Jay Kasai and Joe Sweatpants, known as the Midnight Run podcast back in 2017.
We don't even have to talk about in detail. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, continue.
Yeah. So that's pretty much how that started. I followed all of them. Cam is an artist that I covered for numerous platforms such as Payday LA and other platforms I wrote for in the past in Virginia, and actually fought to cover IE artists on Virginia platforms.
Yeah. Nice.
But I'll save that story for another time. So that's how all that happened. Found out Richard was also a professor. I taught for his class last year, virtually, of course. And yeah, like our connection has always been tight. I learned he's also a big Stevie Wonder fan like I am from y'all's interview. So I was like, oh, word. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
I always got to respect Stevie, even though, he can see. He's not really blind. Let that be stated for the record.
I mean, we should know that by now at this point, but I mean,
hey, man, it's one of the greatest hustles of all time, and I'm not mad at him for it.
Me neither.
He gave us something to love. You know what I mean? Ribbon in the Sky is beautiful, so I'll never take it away from him. So coming from VA, as you stated earlier, there's a lot of rich history there in terms of music, different types of creative artists themselves. Plug for the show. You yourself you dabble in a lot of different things. You wear a lot of different hats. Poetry though seems to be the thing that you have the most love for, it seems. Did that start back in Richmond, or was that much later in life?
It did start back in Richmond, all the way back in 2008. So I was still in grade school during that time, just trying to figure life out, and I was very shy and timid during that time. So writing was like one of my earlier mediums to truly express myself and also get over a stuttering issue that I had. So that built up over the years pretty much to where I would eventually perform at open mics, be a part of my alma mater's international slam poetry team, just plan different events off that, perform on national platforms and local platforms as well. Eventually published 2 poetry books, which I'm sure we'll get into later, and somehow found my way into journalism because of poetry. Like, it's a very complex story that, I'm still trying to figure out the best way to tell it in a simple manner. Yeah. But I know that shit is honestly going to be hard for me to do. So I just get into the full story anyway, whenever people ask me how I really start this shit.
Yeah, I mean, that could be book 3, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. To dive a little bit deeper into that, what is it about poetry specifically that really speaks to you in as like a creative art form? Like, what is it about all that outside of all the other mediums that were available and you had access to? What was it about poetry that stuck the hardest?
So with myself, okay. So how can I put this? I felt like it became an easier way to express myself compared to when I used to record music as a recording artist. So from 2014 through 2016, I dropped 6 mixtapes in 2 years. And I was still dabbling in between like the poetry and music and still overcoming like that speech issue that I mentioned earlier. And I was like, okay, like poetry is just a cappella rap pretty much. I can truly dictate the pace here. And especially with Richmond, Virginia being a highly progressive city, a highly expressive city on a variety of different manners, from the school to prison pipeline, the sex trafficking, to homicide rates, to racial inequalities. That was like the platform for me to really speak on certain manners within my hometown. So I stuck with the poetry route after I realized okay, like I'm getting some decent traction with music. Like I'm performing at NCA&T out in Greensboro, North Carolina, a top HBCU, in my opinion. Yeah. But in 2016, because of the poetry, I also transitioned into journalism, which we'll get into later. But sticking towards the poetry, it was a way of expressing myself through crazy situations. Because in 2016, I was overcoming academic probation and a second stint of addiction to lean and pills. So it was like, oh, yeah, if I fuck up this one college semester, I'm going back to sleeping on the floors in Southside Richmond, Virginia. So let me not fuck this up, okay? So in a sense, it kept me grounded. It kept me balanced while I was getting my grades up, while I was still making the connections, and that transition from music to journalism happened. But I was still in that slam poetry organization, hosting open mics, having people come from Eastern Virginia, 2 hours away, from DC, 2 hours away, from North Carolina, that's 2 hours away, just to see me and the slam poetry team really do their thing. And I'm just like, wow, I really do feel like this is something that I can progress with and stick through. And man, poetry has taken me to a lot of different places and even influenced the journalism career.
Awesome, man. So Speaking of your transition, especially when it comes to your education, where I understand that you dropped out early, but you were able to go and actually finish your education in college. Was the journalism bug starting to happen around that time, or did that come about some other way?
So the journalism bug happened in 2016, right? Mm-hmm. So the time that I believe that I was a true staple in the Richmond, Virginia music scene was 2016 when Sway came from his offices to Richmond, Virginia to like have this private film screening of a 12-minute short film called The Cycle. And like you could find it on Vimeo for like $4 or $5, maybe $7 because of inflation. But the 12-minute short film was a film about inner city violence and police brutality. So think of situations like a George Floyd, Sandra Bland, except all of the actors were Black.
Yeah. Okay.
So that really stood out to a lot of people, especially in Richmond, Virginia, that are highly progressive. So during the Q&A, like I was still in like the tailspin of like my music career during the time. And I was like, no, I shouldn't kick a freestyle this way. Right. So I thanked them for introducing me to my idols at the time, like Glam, who's a Oakland native rapper that actually influenced me to rap, Big Crit, IDK, and I'm hearing all these murmurs in the background. And I quote some Andy Mineo lyrics from a 2014 Doomsday Cypher featuring Glam. And I used to watch that video regularly. And Andy Mineo was rapping through like the political corruption side of things, and through some perspective, he said, a white man with a gun, oh, that's insane. A Black man with a gun, oh, I told you they're all the same. So I quoted those lyrics this way, and I asked him, how does those bars from the 2014 Doomsday Cypher correlate with the topic of the film, and how can the film create further conversations in society? And Sway was like, whoa. Oh, man, I got to call Andy on that one. And then he answered my question, and all of these people started coming up to me. A future internship came up to me, the Cheats movement, which I'll get into in a very little bit. This film director came up to me that followed the rise of rappers like IDK, Pre, who's a Hawaiian rapper who covered Ahmad Lewis, all in this documentary, and even Logic. And he gave me a raw copy of the film that showed Logic coming up from the basement in College Park, Maryland, signing the Visionary Records. The Cheats movement followed me on Twitter, and like after doing a cypher for them, they brought me on, and we talked about Joe Budden's like upcoming album during that time. And eventually they reached out to a 19-year-old version of myself, because I'm gonna be 26 at the ending of the month. Like, hey, can you help us book Joe Budden? I'm like, shit, sure, cool. Because my 3 poetry influences are Budden, IDK, and Dante Alighieri. Dante's Inferno is still one of the best pieces of literature that I ever read. But also shout out Purgatory and shout out Paradise. So that happened, and this uprising platform during the time reached out to me because my pin tweet was literally kicking it with Joe Budden at VIP at the Broadberry in Richmond, Virginia. And they was like, yo, like, we need you to be like the Richmond head, because they were based in Northern Virginia.
Spread some of that love. I feel it.
So I became the head writer, and my first interview was with one of my idols from Richmond, Virginia, Nicholas F. So I was like, oh, this is big. And he was also a former classmate of mine at VCU, which was the craziest thing, because I was like, yo, I grew up watching him on BET 106 in Park, him doing features with Drake. Like, this is insane. And he's from where I'm from? Oh, okay. So that's where the journalism thing really began. And I just stuck with it ever since.
That's really impressive, man. So now in your current state, your current phase in your life, the journalism and the poetry seem to really work hand in hand with each other. You mentioned earlier that you did 2 poetry books, I guess one in 2020, one in 2021. Subsequently, do those poetry books that you do influence the way you talk about artists and things that you do in your journalism, or do you keep those two things separate?
Honestly, yes, because when I began my journalism career, I would pay attention to the certain references and certain samples and how like track listing affected how you really digested a project rather than just tossing this track here and that track there. Like I was really analytical with everything, and that tied into my poetry as well. And early influence of that was me honestly bullshitting during like my technology class, going on Rap Genius and just like learning the different meanings of like random lyrics and seeing how this was tied into that. And I was like, oh, okay. So it's like the links on a chain. So how do I chain everything together? So that's how I improved my writing over time and just improving my analytical skills as a journalist, to where like a year and a half in, like people out of state wanted me to review their stuff. And I was like, and they're like, yeah, like we saw you cover this person's project and thought the way that you approached this was really dope. Like, can you do this for me? And I'm like, sure. And that just carries over into poetry as well.
Nice. So you just have this really nice, like kind of snowball effect.
Yeah.
And because of the writings that you've done and the journalistic prowess that you have, you've been able to get yourself tied to a lot of big name artists. And as you mentioned before, especially people like Dipset, which is interesting because I'm a big fan of Dipset myself. So do you have right now kind of like a favorite interview currently? And is there someone that's on the docket that you're looking forward to talking to in 2023?
All right, so one of my all-time favorite interviews have to be video director Seb Deans. And how that interview happened was because I was a part of a music video of his for this random New Zealand metal band that has an extra long name, and I can't remember the name to save my life. But this was in 2020. I knew his mentee that I was also in a film of his for Pratt University up in New York. So, like, having worked with that director before and hearing that Seb Deans was his mentor, who shot the Denzel Curry Clout Cobain video, the Action Bronson Mongolia video, and numerous metal and rock bands all over the world, I was like, yeah. So I interviewed Seb Deans to talk about mental health and how like that affected his career as a videographer, animator, editor. And his story was so unique. Like he used to talk about how he will push art from Vermont to New York and just being really out there with like his left field responses. And at the ending of the interview, I'll never forget it. He's like, yo, I came into this video directing game 10 years ago. If you would tell me I would be 60 pounds overweight and have an addiction to speed to get through shoots, I would have probably chose a different profession. I'm like, wow. Whoa. And I was just silent for like 10 seconds. I'm like,
what a thing to get, right?
Yeah. And I asked him like, yo, like, are you sure you want me to include this? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, all right. So you like shooting BB guns all up on I-95, like looking for weed from this one city to another city. Like that was also funny too. But that ending bit, I was like, yo, what a powerful interview. The Cam Archer on Payday LA interview was also pretty cool too. That was like literally, Cam is one of my favorite artists in recent years. And I'm not saying that just because of the podcast. Like this is a genuine thing. Yeah, like it's a very genuine thing.
There's two things that we love on the Do the Wrong Thing podcast. It's self-deprecation and also self-love. It's an odd thing that we both love self-love and self-deprecation, but somehow it marries itself. You know what I mean? It's like waffles and cocaine. They just secretly go together in more ways than one. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that one was pretty cool too. And then a recent one, I'll go all the way back to last year when I interviewed the former senior VP of Rockefeller Records, Kenny Burns, and his artist Prime. So it was a dual interview, and
nice.
Even how that happened was also crazy as well. So
Tell us about it. Do we have time? Go for it.
Yeah.
What's the story?
Back in February of 2020, like a month before COVID closed, Kenny Burns spoke at Virginia Union University, which is also in like the downtown / West End area of Richmond, Virginia. VCU and Virginia Union, because I was living like right in between VCU and Virginia Union. So it was literally just walking distance. Like I was right in the middle point. I was scrolling through social media. One of the professors / great creatives I follow, Ricky Parker, who owns numerous businesses and is a professor for Virginia Union, was a former VCU professor. Him and Kenny Burns go all the way back to the early 2000s. And I'm like, yo, what? Wow. So, like, as soon as I heard that Kenny Burns was there, I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to have to go ahead and see that and hear more about his story and how Freaknik originated and how he was partners with Diddy and then rivals with Diddy with Grey Goose versus Rock. So I thought that was a very unique like marketing story for sure. The stuff happening at BET Weekend in like 04, 05, and just kept in touch with like Kenny. And Kenny is a co-owner of one of my favorite whiskeys, Uncle Nearest. That's not a paid sponsor.
But pay us. You know what I mean?
Yes.
If you hear this and you want to pay us, pay us.
Yes.
Always pay us.
A perfectly Black-owned whiskey. Like, and it's very rare to find it out here in California. And it annoys the hell out of me because I'm like, all right, so I'm going to be on a dry spell for like 3 months until I could get like some fire whiskey. Got you. So, yeah, just really keeping in touch and found out his artist Prime is also from where I'm from. And I'm like, okay, so let me go ahead and pitch this, and everything worked out well.
Perfect, man. I like that. So as far as, do you have anything lined up for 2023 that you're ready to speak about?
It's honestly still early, man. Like I'm still just settling into like the IE area because I never lived anywhere else outside of Richmond, Virginia. Yo, sorry, like Cam's just talking shit, and it's the funniest thing.
I know. He's good for that.
Yes,
it's his favorite thing.
He is, but I'm still like settling into the Inland Empire. Like I traveled everywhere, but I never lived anywhere. So being 2,000 miles away from home and still learning about the resources here and everything being much more spaced out compared to Richmond, like everything is so together, like all in one city. And then DC's right there, Virginia Beach is right there. Like, so just like getting used from one creative environment to another. Like that's something I'm still figuring out. With being a part of Dipset's PR team, a lot of random things can come last minute.
Sure.
I'll like also mention something off air because I'm not sure if I can say this in the public yet, but I'll mention something off air for you. Yeah,
so, we don't want nobody rolling up in like an Escalade with all pink. You know what I mean? Just what you say on that podcast? You know what I mean? We don't want that.
Exactly.
So, yeah, no, be safe. Exactly. Be safe.
Yeah. So with like the PR stuff, it's very interesting. Yeah, and that same team, some of their former clients was Cardi B during the whole, before and during Bodak Yellow. WWE on numerous occasions. The craziest thing about working in PR, for me anyway, was like how very last minute and random things can be. So, yeah. But
did you guys have to go into overdrive on the PR side when they suffered such a handed loss in the versus battle against Jada and the Locks? Did you have to like scrub accounts and start like deleting comments and be like, hey, yo, no, you don't understand. just a lot of like comments like, hey, yo, like so a lot of new comments to pull them out.
So look, I wish I was on the team when that was happening.
Okay.
So like this will just be a year in February that I've been a part of like Dipset's PR team. But I wish I was there during that time. So like
what a time.
Yeah. What a time. And I'm a fan of both. And I actually ran into Jadakiss at ComplexCon when I was with Dipset. Yeah. So like one random day in like November, Jim Jones and Joel Santana was interviewed at No Jumper.
Mm-hmm.
And Complex Con was happening in Long Beach. And I wished it happened on a Sunday rather than a Saturday, because Sunday, Pusha T, No Malice, Nigo, like all of them was going to be there. So I was like, fuck,
I saw that.
right?
Yeah, I saw that.
And like, even though beating No Malice was also pretty cool as well, 2018 Virginia Union, like I also wanted to meet Push. But anyway, doing Complex Con and No Jumper like in the same day, I'm like, yo. And Jadakiss was a part of this shoe panel. So it was DJ Clark Kent, Vashti, who's the first female to have a Jordan deal.
Oh, I watched it.
Yeah.
I watched the panel. So you probably can tell.
There.
You probably can tell from my background. Shoes are a big part of my life. So I definitely tuned in for that. I will say this, and I don't want you to get in trouble for my words. These words are words of mine alone. All right.
You're good.
That was a terrible, terrible panel. Why did they have so many old New York niggas talking about sneakers? Why were they up there? I was one of the worst. Vashti was the only saving grace for that panel, and she tried her damnedest. She really did just like try to hold it together. But like Jim Jones commented, and this is really far off topic, I apologize. Yeah. But Jim Jones, I got to rant about it. Jim Jones. Fucking talking about sneakers or what's hot and what's not is just the worst, because he's just buying shoes. You know what I mean? Jadakiss, same thing. They're just buying sneakers. You know what I mean? They're not really like into it. They just see some colors that look good, rock. You know what I'm saying? Any day that they're not rocking the Timbs, you know what I'm saying? That's what they're putting on. I get it.
Yeah.
That as a sneaker lover, watching that panel was rough. And I really hope next year when they hold Complex Con, I hope they get younger people. I hope they get people who are like actually invested into the sneaker community. I mean, DJ Clark Kent is he's a mythos upon himself when it comes to like sneakers, right? Mm-hmm. So there's nothing that can be really said about his takes, just because he's been in it for so long. But yeah, that grouping was an odd choice, I thought, for that venue. And from what I saw, comment wise, a lot of people were on the same side as me. I'm an old begrudging, you know what I mean? Like, well, many people will tell you. So like, I get it. I get the sentiment of like, you're the old and move out the way. But in that same sentiment, bring some fresh blood in there so people who actually is like involved, have some tune. Mix it up a little bit. Have somebody old head, get a couple young heads.
Yeah, or like even like have more regional differences.
Right, exactly. You should have all New York up there.
Like everything, and they're in like their 40s, about to go into their 50s, and it's just like everyone except for Vashti. Like, although like they were great personalities, like talking about the sneakers.
Yeah,
like
absolutely.
The whole context within itself, I'm just like, all right.
It wasn't not entertaining.
Yeah.
Let me say that. It wasn't not entertaining. It was just incorrect for a sneaker show.
Yeah.
Where they're building a top 10 and like they're taking stuff out, putting stuff in that clearly doesn't vibe with like the way everyone who is like currently in the sneaker world feels. And it's very much a regional bias, but you know. Yeah.
And then like that was like the whole regional thing was just stuck in my head, because I'm like, okay, like I know in Virginia we call certain things like things, right? So like just having like the different nicknames for certain things, like for example, like in VA we call Air Force Ones Flays or G Phasers, while like out here in California, which I'm a rant for a little bit, which really surprises the hell out of me.
We support rants on the Do the Wrong Thing podcast. Please rant away.
California English is different. I'm like, yo, like y'all really don't got lingo unless y'all go into the hood or say fool. Mm-hmm. While like I'm used to like calling things by like different nicknames. Like for example, McDonald's being Mickey D's, Wally World being Walmart, Air Force Ones being Flays or G Phazos, and then they're like, we call things by what they're actually named after, and I'm like, man, this shit whack. Like, come on now, like, because like out of VA, like we speak in certain codes, and we're not even web developers. Like we just speak in like certain lingos, and that's also very different based on whether you're in Eastern Virginia or you're up in the DMV area, which is like DC, Maryland, Virginia. Well, DC, Maryland, Northern Virginia. Yeah. Yeah, like shout out Wale, shout out IDK, shout out Rico Nasty. So yeah, like so California English is the most proper English, and I'm like, yo, like y'all don't have too much of an accent, but
we get that a lot. When I moved from California to South Carolina, because they call Air Force Ones Willie D's, and then of course in New York they call them uptowns, right? So
yeah,
so it is fun to learn what everybody calls other things, but you're right. I always got to be like, you speak very proper, and I was like, yo, you speak weird. Like, what do you mean I speak proper? But no, I get it. I understand.
And Cam's point too about E40. I feel like E40, E40 is the hip hop Merriam-Webster because he gives like words and definitions to like just random shit, and I'm just like, okay, yeah.
No, he's definitely a wordsmith. By all accounts, he is absolutely a wordsmith.
Definitely.
I wanted to get back on track a little bit. You also are a part of the MSQ shop. Explain a little bit to the people about what that is and what your involvement is of it.
All right. So for the music shop, which we spell it as the MSQ shop, I'm the head writer, editor, internship coordinator, to be a little bit more technical, SEO analyst. So really just a communication specialist in general with them. So we're a indie-based platform from Richmond, Virginia that covers indie acts from all over, but they're just based in Richmond, Virginia. So we have a full creative studio for engineering, producing. We also help with creative direction, PR, logos, branding, placements, just really the whole 9 yards compared to like, if you go to like some bullshit name, like a Infinity Studio to like, just go to like record, or you have to go to a PR company to do this, or like, it's literally a one-stop shop for everything. So how that began was during the Clubhouse days, which came and went.
Yeah, special times. Just that ironically how this pod came together. Yeah.
Wait. All right. Like, I'm not gonna get off track. So with the creative executive OGLO, who's an artist in Richmond, Virginia, he would host these Clubhouse rooms that would have a bunch of different acts from all over Virginia, and even people like Knots and Banks, that's also from Virginia as well, like pull up and listen about grievances within the local music scene. And Illa was like, hey, I'm gonna go ahead and do this. Like, I'm gonna create this. I'm gonna find an office space to where like we could have all of this happening at, and was on board. And like everyone was just bitching, but not really like trying to come up with any solution. So it's like, okay, like there's like 40 to 50 plus people in here, like every Sunday night talking about the same shit, but not really putting any action to it. So Illa reached out to me because Illa and I, we had a working relationship in Richmond, Virginia, where I would cover his stuff, be a part of different panels, perform at like different shows together. Cause I would do like poetry intermissions during rap shows or perform like ciphers. So it was like, okay, like we had that working relationship. And the thing about the music shop, which I really liked, they did not limit themselves to Virginia or like Virginia-based artists. They're like, yo, just cover whatever, do this all over. And in the past with one brand, I fought the cover Cam's Inside Voices. And they was like, yo, like, he's not like Richmond, Virginia. What are you doing? And I'm like, don't y'all want this shit popping to like people in different states?
Right, exactly.
Like, you know, let's go ahead and try something out. And that brand dissipated. Then another brand, I fought to cover another IE artist, and they was like, oh, no, like he's in San Bernardino. That's not like VA based. And it was a combination of like local music, but also covering health. So I was like, okay, like I had to flip it a certain way and pitch it a certain way on my PR shit. And it was like, oh, okay, you know, that's cool. And then that same platform, I interviewed Little B on. They're like, look, you got it at this point. So I was like, all right, y'all finally listened to me 2 years later when I was fighting to cover all these other artists on y'all's platform. But y'all was like, oh, they're not from Virginia. But then as soon as I interviewed Lil B for y'all like, oh, y'all got it. So
you can't stop the bass god. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Thank you, bass god. So
yeah, of course.
With the music shop, like the CFO was actually based out in LA. Mm-hmm. So she's like a good 30, 40-ish minutes away from like where I'm at. And we have writers like, well, staff based in like Virginia, DMV area. We had someone from Kansas for a little bit, which was like random because it's Kansas. Mm-hmm. But, you know, so yeah, with like the music shop in general, just being that one-stop shop for like everything. And with the music shop now, like I'm trying to cover more like editorial, like based content rather than like constantly writing about like this person dropping a single or this person dropping an album. So that way I could put like quality over quantity.
Yeah.
If you will.
Sense.
And being a part of the PR thing as well. And just a couple other like side gigs I'm doing like on like the freelancing end. I'm like, okay, I'm not trying to burn myself out. And I still also got to make time for myself, make time for my poetry, make time for the gym, make time for the social connections that I have out here. Right. So yeah, it's just really big quality over quantity, like right now with the music shop and managing interns, which is insane.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah, like I managed a couple interns from several different universities in Virginia, but recently I submitted a proposal and got the internship program approved for 12 different California colleges.
Wow. Okay.
So
that's
yeah,
big.
yeah. And like all of them are based out in the IE. Like I feel like the IE needs some more resources rather than like LA County or LA
sure,
pretty much. Because I'm like, okay, like just might as well give it to the IE like areas pretty much. So
yeah. It's untapped market for sure.
Exactly. So
yeah, absolutely. So to kind of cap it, what is kind of your goal? Because, you know, it's 2023. It's a brand new year. Do you have any goals lined up for this year? Things that you kind of want to knock off to make sure that you get, you know, check that box? Or is it you kind of open and seeing where the possibilities kind of lead?
I'm really trying to check out what are the possibilities right now. I know the only goal that's kind of materialistic is like getting an electronic vehicle, like whether that's like a Tesla or something else. But like that's like the only materialistic goal. Aside from that, creatively, it's just bettering my journalistic skills, bettering my interviewing skills, and just becoming a better media professional in general. Because I know like the writing is there, but there's certain aspects to it as well. And I say that because from 2015 through 2022, I balanced a media career along with a health-based career. So I was in clinical research, public health, et cetera, like during that time. And then I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and bet on myself and do this. And so far, everything is working. Like,
good.
Like, even though I'm not at like that pure, like full-time, like status yet, because with PR, like it's more like freelance based. Things can happen at like the spur of a moment, and it has. So like that'll be very well. That's my main goal, like to get into like the pure communications field full time, and still maintain the things that I really want to do.
Yeah.
So
all right. So good things to look forward to in this coming year.
Yeah. And to also talk about the second book briefly.
Yeah, please bring it up.
Yeah. So like how rappers do deluxe albums. This is like my deluxe album. So with the first book combined with the second book.
What's
right?
the name of the book?
So the book is called The Mission Told Through Poetry. a collection of poems, pretty much. And this contains poems from 2017 all the way through 2021. And to really keep things like uniform a little bit, like I used like 2 different photos of like where I'm wearing like the exact same attire. And this was actually shot back in 2020 during during one of the many protests in Richmond, Virginia that happened there. Random fun fact, Richmond, Virginia had the 2nd highest protest-related arrests in the nation.
Wow.
Only behind Portland, Oregon, of course. So,
that's a hell of a stat.
Yeah, and all of the protests and riots were happening right where I lived. So everything was happening out of my front door. Yeah. So, like,
did one of the Kardashians hand you Pepsi when you were out there to try to solve everything, or were they not at that one?
No, unfortunately, because I would have just laughed my ass off. But the funniest thing was, all right, so on like a personal matter, I had beef with a former roommate of mine that was on some nut shit, and I kicked him out.
Okay.
And
smart decision.
Yeah. And during the protests, like he walked up to me like months after, like I would see him like on the street, and then he would just run the other way.
Okay.
He's like, yeah, man, like I'm sorry. And then I'm like, all right, so like I forgive you. We got bigger things to deal with, but I like forgive you. There's like enough time that's passing. So it did kind of feel like in the TV commercial type shit, a sense like, all right, unity. Like,
yeah, okay. I'm not mad at that.
Yeah. So, but with this poetry book, the one thing that I did with this, I made it more interactive for readers to where like you can scan QR codes from like features that I've written for artists. Like in songs, so that way people could go to their discography or like their Linktree or their Apple Music or their Spotify and stream the album that it came on. And I also did a clothing collaboration with a Virginia-based clothing line and also a IE-based clothing line as well. So like people could literally scan the QR codes like in their introduction and just cop themselves some merch from like the book. So I really made it to the point where like, even though I'm trying to put myself on, I'm gonna bring other people with me. So yeah, so that combined different features from Smack Your URL Battle rapper Sonny Colfax, Skinny Hendrix, Big Kahuna OG, who I think is based out in Hollywood now, but he was based out in Richmond, Virginia for a bit. Like I'm blanking out on names right now, but it's a couple of other people. So like my main goal was to really give. And the only way to get more is to give plenty. That's what I told my Virginia State students 4 years ago. So the only way to get more is to give plenty.
I like that. I love that. And if somebody wanted to buy your book, where could they go?
So you could look up The Mission Told Through Poetry on Amazon. And literally both of the books will pop up there. And man, like my first book was very successful. Like it ended up in 15 states, China, the UK. And I even gave Lil B a signed copy, like after the interview, which was like crazy. Cause like that interview happened during that time frame where like I was still pushing books out, and he's like, oh yeah, man, like I would definitely love to hear the book, to read the book. And I'm like, all right, got you. And then the second book, like I didn't do as much promo for that.
I'm sorry. We're gonna link everything to the video, and for the folks watching, listening, do the wrong thing. You wrongdoers out there, take your hand off the wheel and look at this so you can buy my man's book, poetry book. What's the name one more time?
Yeah, so the name is The Mission Told Through Poetry, a collection of poems. Or if you just simply look up The Mission Told Through Poetry, then it'll literally pop up.
Okay. All right. We'll make sure to put the link in the description of the video. So if anyone who's interested in purchasing that, it'll be available for you. Trying to make it easy for you. Now, here at the Do the Wrong Thing podcast, we love lists, specifically top 5 lists. So I noticed.
I noticed.
We're gonna do a top 5 rundown for you right now. Are you ready?
Sure.
I knew we'd get one. All
exactly.
Right.
Sure.
All right. So we're gonna run down 5 things really quickly. All right. And we're just gonna culminate it as your Jay's list. Okay. All right. So question number 5. What is
question number 5?
Question number 5. Yeah. So what we're gonna do is you're gonna think about the things that you want, right? Kind of the questions, and you're gonna answer accordingly, and then we'll have your list combined as like this is Jay's list. All right.
Okay.
All right. So question number 5 is, what is your favorite movie?
Goodfellas.
Okay. Not a bad choice.
Yeah.
Not a bad choice. Question number 4. What is your favorite album?
Okay. Hard to Be King by Michael Millions.
Okay. I was hoping for a Pusha T album, but I'll take it. You know what I mean? I'll take it. Question number 3. What is your feel-good TV show? What's your favorite feel-good TV show?
Ed and Eddie, man.
Ed and Eddie. Okay. Quite a pull.
Yeah. Because, like, honestly, like, how I see it is, like, one of the best Cartoon Network shows ever, because that instilled, like, kids to hustle for whatever they can. And they was the prime example. It's like every episode they was getting into a bag. And I was like, all right.
They had to get them jawbreakers. You know what I mean? By any means necessary.
Exactly.
I'm not mad at that. All right. Question number 2. I don't know if you know or not, but we're big fans of candy here. We're big candy lovers here to do the Wrong Thing podcast. What is your favorite candy?
Snickers.
Snickers?
Yeah.
Interesting. So you're a nuts fan. You're nuts in your candy bar, huh? Little nuts and chocolate, what you're into. There's nothing wrong with that. You know what I mean?
That's hilarious.
Nothing wrong with that at all. And lastly, what is your favorite poem?
My magnus opus, honestly, Ordinary Love Shit Part 4. And Cam actually saw me perform that one out in like the Claremont College. Like when he did his set over there. So like that poem itself, like I still have yet to write, to me personally, I still have yet to write as fire of a poem as I have. But over the years, like I've written like conceptual poems based on like artists' discography. So I did flips on Drake's discography for one poem, Nerd, Pusha T and No Malice, IDK, Joe Budden, et cetera. But Ordinary Love Shit Part 4 was written in 2019. So it's like I'm still chasing that golden dragon. Like I'm like, honestly, I feel like old man Taker trying to like chase this like golden match. And it's like I'm trying to find like my like boneyard match against AJ Styles pretty much with that one. And like I can actually read it too if like we got a little bit of time.
We have the time. Go for it.
Right,
Give us an excerpt.
Oh man. So honestly, it's like a minute and a half, 2 minutes long, pretty much. That's how I try to keep my poems. So, and I said, hey, yo, have you ever stopped looking for something and what you're looking for appears? Funny how life works like that. When I don't flirt like that, what I see comes along. Appear. I sat on piers as a woman cried tears and only understood from the outside end of their softer upbringings. Our stories were always different. So when I told mine, they cried and were surprised on what I overcame and how I had no shame of my past. When I began knowing you more, it was like talking to a shattered mirror. Your body is a house Your soul is the foundation. So when I saw your eyes and realized how the window panes revealed your pain, I said with you I want to gain and maintain. The way you expounded on your surroundings had me confounded. We grew up in poverty, gang influences and more, slept on floors using the oven for heat as our bloods boiled over how our moms soiled to keep our family stable. We worked under the table to provide for the house. I did legwork while you carried the arms, but risking our lives, putting ourselves in harm to maintain stability, unloading our emotions through our own versions of artillery. We put lead to paper like it was target practice, aiming for better lives, visualizing a better time, living in a room while trying to survive. We were robbed of a peaceful childhood, so we tried to play our grounds, how to swing a new direction to break out the cycle of poverty. You lived in project housing, and I grew up in a trailer, so we both grew up with cold hearts seeking better insulation, how we gave open invitations to our souls and gratitude rolled off our tongues, expunged any faulty issues in our foundations. You truly came up almost exactly like how I came up. And it's shocking to me. It's shocking to see a woman go through so much ugliness and not become it. You're used to nothing, so I'll give you a bit of everything. Affection, connection, trust, a bit of lust, robust pride, the will to not hide after an argument. You know, ordinary love shit. You saw me at low points I hit from most, and you lifted my chin up. I cried rivers in your arms, and your divine energy is like oceans, the African goddess of love and sweet waters. Over time, our divine energies curated our synergy to be prolific and authentic. The goal with you is growth and comfort. I want you to open to me as I'm opening to you, so let's enjoy the process of progress.
Woo! Love it. Normally we would have hand claps, but because the game is on for those as of recording, playoffs are happening right now. So our normal producer is out, and my other producer that's in is currently a San Francisco 49ers fan, so I don't have as much production value as I would normally get. But
it is okay.
Fucking good, man.
Yeah. So like,
good.
Yeah. So like the story behind that poetry series. So it started in 2017, and that poem was like a 3-minute like poem influenced by like the Inferno, Purgatory, and Paradise of like Dante Alighieri, right? But I gave it like random references to like the Love in This Club video, random button reference here and there. But yeah, so it was supposed to be like an annual series thing. But then for some reason in 2019, I wrote like 3 different parts to it. And I was like, okay, so I did part 3 already. And then part 4 came along. And then part 5 was like an ending of the year thing. So like I closed out the series in 2020.
Yeah.
Because I was like, all right, like I'm not trying to make it like the Fast and Furious series and the Saw movies where there's like 10 different Saw films when they should have stopped at Saw 3. But yeah, like I had to stop that there. But that poem is like, on the technical aspect, like to me anyway, like the best technical aspect. And Richmond, Virginia is also a very big battle rap city. So like there's certain like battle rap influences, like, oh, like I did legwork while you carried the arms, both risking our lives, putting ourselves in harm to maintain stability, unloading our emotions through our own versions of artillery. We put lead to paper like it was target practice, man.
Okay.
Man, look, like I literally had people ask me, am I going to perform that specific piece at different open mics? And even when things was opening up in 2021 and I did like this huge outdoor festival, like I had battle rappers that like heard that poem, like was like, yo, so like, are you gonna do that one poem like about the gun flip? And I was like, which one are you talking about? Oh, like the John you did at Tuesday Versus. And I was like, bruh, I did a lot at Tuesday Versus. You got to be more specific. Oh, you know, like the jump where like you had that like insulation bar where like Shorty grew up in a project house. And I was like, oh, that, yeah. Okay,
you know the one.
cool.
You know the one.
Yeah. So, yeah, but that's like, it's just references on references on references. Like that's like how I used to study like fucking rap genius trying to figure things out. And I'm like, okay, like that, like literally chaining everything together. That's a perfect example. And throughout the poems, like, well, for most of the OLS poetry series, Like I would say ordinary love shit, it involves affection, connection, trust, a bit of lust, robust pride, the will to not hide after an argument. And that was like the signature stamp. So I did that for most of the poem. So yeah, like still a very fun piece to perform 4 years later. So
perfect, man. I love it. What a good piece to end on. Jay, it has been phenomenal having you on. Can you please tell the Wrongdoers where they can find you?
My social media is literally everything Justin is Prime. So Justin is Prime. And I used to have a closing bar for like all of my ciphers where I was like, they say he's Justin is Prime, made it beyond rap. And if I ever pass my prime, I'm going to lap it. And I used to say that like after I stopped my music career, because people like didn't know like I used to rap. And I'm like, I just choose not to because I have a lot more doors open for me doing this than that shit. So I'm like, all right, you know. And then they're like, oh, so you really did make it beyond rap. And I'm like, yes, Justin is Prime.
Nice. I love it. I love it. For everybody who's out there listening, if anyone who is in the community is currently working on something or has something creative that they would love to come on the show and share, please, please, please hit us in our DMs or in our socials. We would love to talk to you and see about setting up another creative artist sessions. Please follow us on our socials, both on Instagram and on Twitter as DTWT Pod. That again is DTWT Pod. You can also find this video when it uploads at youtube.com/@DTWT Pod. Jay, it's been a pleasure. Thank you for coming on to the Creative Artist Sessions. Thank you guys for listening. Thank you guys for watching. Do the wrong thing. Wrongdoers. We out.